Hey, North Coast, we're glad that you're with us today. My name is Rob Morace. I'm one of our high school pastors here. If you're looking for sermon notes or more information, you can go to northcoastchurch.com for more details. We are continuing in our series of Mark, the Untold story of Jesus, so grab your Bibles as we dive into God's Word. We hope that you enjoy.
It is the silence of the last 400 years that now screams down every avenue, every block, bounces off the rock walls of the city gate and echoes through the temple chambers. And I think we have to catch that silence. 400 years of silence. 400 years since the Old Testament had been written for this nation called Israel. 400 years for the children of God, God's people, to go without a word, a whisper, a sentence, a verse from him. No prophet, no king, no priest. No one has uttered, "Thus saith the Lord," for 400 years. And yet this little nation holds on to promises. Promises going all the way back to the first book of the Bible, Genesis. Promises to a guy named Abraham that if you leave your family and if you leave your area and if you follow me, I will make you a great nation. And out of that great nation, I will send a son, a seed, a deliverer, salvation for all people. And they've been holding on to promises. For 400 years, heaven has remained tight-lipped. So for 400 years, they've been writing to give each other hope. It's a little group of literature called apocalyptic books. They're not in the Bible. They're books meant to just be right around to each other, holding on to promises. One day he'll come. One day he'll show up. It'll be unmistakable. He may or may not wear a cape. You know how superheroes are. But he's going to have a giant M on his chest. Messiah man will show up. Oh, and people will know he comes from God. He's going to do things that no ordinary human can do. And when he comes, he will set things straight. And for 400 years, this little nation of Israel has been holding on to nothing but promises. Literature of hope. And they're tired. They're tired for the last 600-700 years being a mere pawn, traded amongst the world empires, being taken over by the Babylonians, by the Persians, by the Assyrians, by the Greeks, now the Romans. When will our day come? And for the last 3 years, this guy fits the profile. For the last 3 years, people say he's able to walk on water. His spit heals incurable diseases and causes the blind to see. With a touch or a word, molecules rearrange themselves on bodies and leprosy flees. And the type of teaching that draws grown men, dock workers, big barrel-chested dudes that move wooden ships by hand for a living, to leave everything and say, "That's what I've been waiting for." So when he rides into that capital city that week, out of every day on the calendar, oh, the silence of 400 years explodes. This is their high holy holiday. This is the Passover. This is what every good Jewish family wants to make a pilgrimage to Jerusalem just to be there and celebrate Passover, their Independence Day, their 4th of July. When God broke in back in their history, second book in the Bible, Exodus, when they exited the great nation, Egypt, the most powerful world empire at the time, and God brought Egypt to its knees with plagues because the angel of death passed over every Jewish household, and they've been celebrating it ever since. So on their high holiday of patriotism, of freedom, of deliverance, when he comes riding a donkey into the city gate, that's why the crowds start chanting, "Hosanna, Hosanna, save now, save now." You felt a chill go down your spine when someone took lungs full of air and screamed it out, "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord," and everyone erupted. To come in the name of someone means to come with their power and their authority. To come in the name of the Lord, oh, save now, bring some lightning bolts. Save now, bring some lightning bolts. And just in case this powder keg of a nation needed one more spark, somewhere from the rooftops, a crowded balcony overlooking the entire scene, it has screamed, "Blessed is the coming kingdom of David!" And it erupts. The last time your nation had freedom, power, its own military, judicial, and spiritual rule, the last time your neighboring countries feared you, goes all the way back 1,000 years to the kingdom of David. Save now, come with power, save now, kick Roman butt. And the crowd is chanting this Palm Sunday. And at the end of the parade we saw 2 weeks ago, Jesus simply walks into the temple, looks around, realizing the parade took longer than he thought. It's late in the day. He just went back out and camped outside the city because everyone's camping outside the city. There is no room left inside the city. And yet one of the most bold, strategic, calculated moves in all of history. Remember, for the last 6 chapters it's been building. For the last 6 chapters there's been opposition. For the last 6 chapters there's a group of people that hate him, that are trying to figure out how to get rid of him. The spiritual leaders. Do you see what he just did? At the end of the parade, where they got to be inside hearing the cheers, where they're trying to figure out, does anybody know where he's staying? Does anybody know what city he's in? Does anybody know how to flush this guy out? How can we find this guy? And they hear the cheers, save now, come with power. And he walks into their headquarters just to look around. What? He just kicks in the saloon door. There's a new sheriff in town, boys. Doesn't say a word. See you tomorrow. Just the ultimate mic drop of I'm calling the shots. And if anyone's running from someone, you're running from me. We picked it up last week. Larry did this great job of showing us. Jesus starts early in the morning. He heads back to the temple. And as he starts moving toward the city, there's a fig tree. And of course, you need breakfast and nothing better than a fig Newton on the way in just to get something in the gut. And it's a fig tree that has leaves. And if a fig tree's in leaf, it should have figs, even though it's not the time of the season for figs. And it's a weird little verse in there, but I think it sets up the entire week. So he walks up to a tree that's pretending to have fruit, but it has no fruit. And when there's no figs, he curses the tree. Then he walks in the temple and he knocks over all the tables and chairs. And a really bad Snickers commercial busts out in the book of Mark. It's like, Jesus missed breakfast. He's hangry. Gonna be a bad morning at church when you miss breakfast. Oh, God, music was out. It's too hot, too cold, too loud. Why is it Chris Brown? Why can't it be Hilkin? I read the communication cards. I just go, you needed a Snickers. Next. And yet the entire week is set up in those two scenes. You masquerade in having fruit. You masquerade in calling yourself a Christian. You masquerade by where you go to church. But he can see under the leaves. There's nothing here. And now I'm going to a temple, a church that masquerades in being loving, accepting, open. A place where all nations should be able to find the one true God and grace and mercy, and they're being ripped off at the scales. Temple has its own currency. They can't even give in their own monetary value. They have to exchange it at exorbitant rates. And he tears the church down. And he stays there the night teaching. On Tuesday morning, we find him going back to the same place. Oh, he's not running from a fight. He's picking one. And now, the spiritual leaders have had time to collect their thoughts. And they come at him. So if you missed the last 2 weeks or 38 weeks, you're now caught up. This is the most important week of your life. Can you just grasp that before we keep reading? This is the most important week of your life. To your singleness, the most important week of your spouse's life, the most important week of your kid's life. This is that week. He will claim who he is and what he needs to do. 3 times going into this week, he said, I will allow the chief priests, the leaders of the law, the Pharisees, to take me, mock me, spit on me, beat me, abuse me. I'm going to allow them to hang me on a cross. And 3 days later, I will walk out of my own tomb. And if I can't pull off who I claim to be, don't write it down. And if I can't back up this week, don't read a single word in red letters. But if I am who I claim to be, then this week splits all of time. And the only hope you and I have of any eternity in any life here, this is that week. Mark chapter 11, verse 27. They, being Jesus and the disciples, now on the next morning, arrive again in Jerusalem. And while Jesus was walking in the temple courts, the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders came to him. You don't think the disciples understand what's going on? Here they come. 3 times he has told us on the road, this is the group that will beat him. This is the group that will kill him. And when these guys arrive on the scene, you don't think the disciples are in heightened alert? Is it going to go down here? Is this where it happens? On top of that, these 3 groups represent the Sanhedrin. It's the ruling body of 70 elders for all of Israel. These 3 groups are the supreme court in the nation of Israel, not just judicially, but morally, ethically, spiritually. There is no higher word, no higher law in your entire nation on any level than the Sanhedrin. This is their capital. Yesterday, he flipped over their tables and chairs in their own headquarters, in the most high holy place, the temple. So when this group shows up, it is all power, all authority in the nation of Israel. And this is the group it's supposed to go down with. And when these guys arrive, the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders came to him. By what authority are you doing these things, they ask, and who gave you authority to do this? Now Jesus replied, I will ask you one question, and you will answer me. You can't do that. You can't do that. Okay. I know you make lousy Jewish audience. I'm married into a Jewish family. It doesn't make me one, but let's try to understand their concept a little bit. In our language, if you're ever called before the Supreme Court in America, and you're standing there, and they're like, we're going to ask you a question, and you better answer truthfully. Here's what you don't say. No, I'm going to ask you a question, and you better answer me. What? Unless you think you're a higher authority than the Supreme Court of all things spiritual, judicial in the land. You know these guys have been staying up all night. You know these guys have been in huddles. You know these guys have gotten on the phone, old-timey phone, like cord and everything, rotary. Martha won't be coming home tonight. We got some work to do. Yeah, some clown kicked over our tables and chairs. Yep, same clown we've been going after. You know they've been up around the fires and the candles and the tables late at night. How do we get them? How do we get them? Oh, this city is swollen 20 times its normal population because everyone has come this week to celebrate Passover. If we try anything in the midst of the crowd, just by force, there's going to be a riot of epic proportions. People love this dude. We got to make him slip up. We got to find dirt on him. We're going to ask you a question, John the Baptist. Or we're going to ask you a question. By what authority do you do these things? Nope. I'm going to ask you one question and answer me. And I will tell you then by what authority I'm doing these things. John's baptism, was it from heaven or from men? Tell me. And they discussed it among themselves and said, God, man, if we say it's from heaven, then he's going to ask, then why didn't you believe him? But if we say it's merely from men, well, you see, they feared the people, for everyone held that John was really a prophet. So they answered Jesus, we don't know. And Jesus said, oh, well, neither will I tell you by what authority I'm doing these things. And here's what's at play. Let's break it down to our own language, can we? If you want to take your note sheet and the first fill in the blank and follow along on this. After the city's turned upside down, there's only one question that remained, and now they try to get him to answer it in front of everyone in the temple courts. Their question in our language today is this: who do you think you are? Who do you think you are to ride into our town, our temple, and flip over our tables and chairs? Who do you think you are? Who gives you the authority to do this? And Jesus says, let me ask you a question. John the Baptist. Remember, it goes all the way back to chapter 1. The guy that baptized Jesus in the Jordan River. The guy who before that told the people, hey, don't look at me. Don't think that I'm great. There's going to be one who's about to come whose sandals I am not fit to even stoop down and untie. And when he baptizes Jesus in the Jordan River, heaven splits and the Spirit, like a dove, a voice from heaven comes down and says, this is my son whom I love. So Jesus goes all the way back to this guy. Remember this guy? We read about him in chapter 6. This guy, John the Baptist, spoke against Herod's marriage because Herod married his brother's wife. Not his brother's widow, his actual brother's wife. And John the Baptist spoke against Roman sexuality. And no one speaks against Roman sexuality. And John the Baptist could have gone back and said, well, the words are actually different today. Maybe in its original language it meant something else. Maybe it doesn't. You shouldn't deny yourself. But John held to the truth of Scripture, regardless of what Rome said about sexuality. And they threw him in prison. And one night when the party is raging and the alcohol is flowing, they cut off his head and they bring it out on a platter to delight the drunken guest. See, John immediately became a martyr. He became one who stood up to the Roman government on behalf of the truth of Scriptures. And the people now call him a prophet. So let me ask you a question. Was John's authority from heaven or from men? And the highest spiritual court in the land look at each other and realize, if we say it's from heaven, then he's going to say, then why don't you believe him? When he baptized me, he claimed that I was the Messiah. He claimed that one greater was coming. He claimed that the Messiah would walk. And heaven itself claimed I was the Son of God. And yet they can't claim that what Jesus is doing is from heaven. They can't back up his story. But if they claim John was just a mere man and didn't have heavenly authority, the crowds are going to tear him to shreds. The highest spiritual court in the land, in their own headquarters, in a crowded temple, with the crowd that is watching, has to admit, we don't know what spiritual authority is. Are you kidding me? Who do you think you are? This is the question that we put on top of our note sheet today. Who does God think he is? This is the question in our life groups this week. One of our first questions is going through Colossians chapter 1 together, where Paul is in prison. He goes, let me tell you who this Jesus is, just in case you missed it. Let me tell you who the Son of God is and the power and the authority. He's the very icon of the living God. Did you get that? He's the very image, icon of the living God. Colossians in your homework this week is going to start with. In other words, on your desktop, there's a little picture of Jesus, and when you click him, you get God. That's who he is. Change it this way in our language. Number 2, what gives you the right to change my life? What gives you the right to waltz into my temple and flip over tables and chairs? What gives you the right to change my life? Now, North Coast, let me tell you, all of our campuses and all of our venues today, I wrestle with the exact same question, and I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands because you do too. When I come to the pages of the Bible that I love, I'm like, oh, it's so good to read Bible today. When one of these 3 teaching pastors steps on something that I'm dealing with, and here's my question, who do you think you are to tell me how to live in this area? Who do you think you are to tell me what to do with my finances, to what to do with my job, what to do with my relationship, what to do with my sexuality, what to do with my ethics, what to do with my morality? Who do you think you are? He walks into the temple. Temple is king in Jerusalem. And he says, this isn't the way it should be. And yes, their question is my question today. Who does God think he is to demand that I have to deny myself, that I should sacrifice in that way, that I have to be born again? Because this is what Rome, our culture today, holds as the highest king. Nobody in America today should ever deny themselves their pleasure, their orientation, their sexuality, their wants, their desires. Why in the world would you ever deny yourself? This is the very essence of life. Don't deny yourself. Why would you sacrifice something that's so lovely or pure or innocent? In fact, this is the way you were made. You were born this way. And yet Jesus' call to the crowd has continually been, anyone can follow me. You have to deny yourself. Pick up your cross. This will take sacrifice. And I know you've all been born with sin and into sin. You're going to be born again. And the question that we respond with is, who does this God think he is? Well, what's the table and chairs in your life today that when we touch on it, when we teach about it, that you immediately go, oh, that's not me. That you immediately go, oh, this is why it's different for us. That's what this entire story has been about. And now in Jerusalem, it culminates with, you call yourself a fig tree, but there's no figs. You call yourself a church of love and acceptance and grace and mercy, but there is no grace and mercy. The next story we had last week was, you call yourself a people, but there's no prayer, faithfulness, and forgiveness. And now he shows up and says, let me tell you who I am. I am the one John the Baptist prophesied about. I am the Son of God. And just in case you need to make it clear, he says, let me give you a story. Chapter 12. He then began to speak to them in parables. So a man planted a vineyard. He put a wall around it. He dug a pit for the winepress, and he built a watchtower. Then he rented the vineyard to some farmers and went away on a journey. And it's story time at church, and the crowd and the religious leaders that are now embarrassed and humiliated are all standing there listening to, what? Now you're telling a story about a vineyard that's been given a watchtower and has been given a winepress and has been given walls. And I want to take you back to first century Jewish hearing, ears, mindset. These people know exactly where he's going. It's as if someone came today and said, let me tell you a story about a country. I'm not going to name which one. We'll just call it the land of the free and the home of the brave. And all of us would be, hey, think you're talking about us. It's like, well, yeah. This is exactly what's going on here. In your notes, right above Mark chapter 12, write Isaiah 5, 1 through 7. Isaiah 5, 1 through 7. Man, I'm racing the clock today, so I'm just going to read it to you. Isaiah, one of the greatest prophets, one of the largest books written by a prophet in the Old Testament, says this in Isaiah 5, the song of the vineyard. I will sing for the one I love, a song about his vineyard. My loved one had a vineyard on a fertile hillside. He dug it up and cleared it of stones and planted it with the choicest of vines. He built a watchtower in it, and he cut a winepress as well. Sound familiar? It's the exact story Jesus has done. Then he looked for a crop of good grapes, but it yielded only bad fruit. Now you dwellers in Jerusalem and people of Judah, judge between me and my vineyard. What more could have been done for the vineyard than I have done for it? So when I looked for good grapes, why did it yield only bad? Now I will tell you what I'm going to do to my vineyard. I will take away its hedge, and it will be destroyed. I will break down its walls, and it will be trampled. I will make it a wasteland, neither pruned nor cultivated, and briars and thorns will grow there. I will command the clouds not to rain on it. Just in case someone needs to connect the dots, verse 7, the vineyard of the Lord Almighty is the nation of Israel, and the people of Judah are the vines that he delights in. And he looked for justice, but saw bloodshed, for righteousness, but he heard cries of distress instead. Oh, believe me, when Jesus has this moment where the religious leaders are completely embarrassed in their own headquarters, and he starts telling the story of a vineyard that an owner planted with grapevines and built a watchtower and a wine press and put walls around it, what he says is, once upon a time in the land of the free and the home of the brave, and people are like, oh, here we go. This is us. We know this story. And Jesus goes, let me flip the script a little on you. At harvest time, the owner sent a servant to the tenants to collect from them some of the fruit of the vineyard. But they seized him, beat him, and sent him away empty-handed. And the crowd is stunned. Well, he sent another servant to them. They struck this man on the head, and they treated him shamefully. He sent still another, and that one they killed. He sent, circle, highlight, underline, many others. Some of them they beat, others they killed. He had one left to send, a son whom he loved. He sent him last of all. Circle, highlight, underline, exclamation point, asterisk, star, emoji of your liking. He sent him last of all, saying, surely they'll respect my son. But those tenants said to one another, this is the heir. Come, let us kill him, and the inheritance will be ours. So they took him and killed him and threw him out of the vineyard. What then will the owner of the vineyard do? He will come and kill those tenants and give the vineyard to others. Haven't you read the scriptures? And he quotes from Psalm 118. The stone that the builders rejected has actually become the cornerstone. The Lord has done this, and it is marvelous in our eyes. Then they looked for a way to arrest him because they knew he had spoken the parable against them. Yeah, this one was clear. But they were afraid of the crowd. So they left him, and they went away. He says, let me tell you about the fig tree outside, and let me tell you about the temple, and let me tell you about what I've been teaching the last 3 years. People, he says, this is about you. I want to break down this story that kind of sums it all up. Number one, the owner gave them everything they needed for success. Everything they needed for success. And I was trying to get this in their language. I was trying to picture this, and I was trying to figure out, he's speaking so clearly into something they understand, especially now that they're under Roman rule. You see, the elite Romans realized incredible wine and vineyards are cultivated and grown all over this Palestinian area. But no good Roman elite is going to live out in Podunkville, Israel, so far from the luxury of Rome. Oh, but to own land, to own your own vineyard, and Roman money came flooding into the nation of Israel. And they were buying up vineyard after vineyard after vineyard and pouring their money into it and making it elite. Because there's nothing better than a house party in Rome when your guests go, extraordinary. Where did this come from? And you say, oh, my vineyard just outside of Jerusalem. So he tells the story that they get, oh, the Romans wouldn't live there and work it, but you're allowed to work it for them. You're allowed to live handsomely off of all the money they poured into the infrastructure. But believe me, when it comes time to pay them, you will pay them, and gladly, because look what they've allowed you to have. And the story takes a twist. And I started trying to think in their terms, in their land, in their language, what is he trying to get at? And I realized that it's probably better seen than heard. See, this entire story is simply about a plot of ground. He says, let me tell you about a perfect vineyard. See, everything's in rows? That's how you do vineyards. This portion of the show will be brought to you by Hobby Lobby. I had my first experience with that time vortex this weekend. 3 trips it took me. But we got it close to right. It's a perfect vineyard. It's a choice parcel and acreage. And on this vineyard, the owner even thought fit to invest and put up a wall. Now, the wall is essential. The wall is essential not just for keeping people out, especially harvest time when the bundles of grapes are all gathered, but more importantly, the wild animals of the area. For the bears and the foxes, for the jackals, for the wild dogs, for the badgers that love to come in and just gobble up the sweet, low-hanging fruit, and they will make a mess and dig up your vineyard. So a great wall is essential. But the owner went above and beyond. The owner also put in there a watchtower. You see, you got to have a watchtower It allows you to view all the plots of land. It allows you to look over everything and to ensure everything is as is, to see the workers and to make sure no one's getting in that shouldn't be there. It also allows harvest time. When you've gathered all of this fruit, when all of it is stored up before it goes into the winemaking process, that's the time you're at the greatest risk for thieves and bandits. And it allows you, your family, and your workers to stay up in it and under it. It gives you shelter for that time of year. He said also we put a wine press in there. Now I couldn't figure out how to dig a hole in this because that's what they do with a wine press and styrofoam. But I got a picture of me in Israel in a wine press. It looks like this. Up on top is where you would put all the grapes, and then you would actually go around and stomp on it. Sometimes a big flattened log would roll around on it. The juices would come down and underneath, and it would pour into these big collecting vats. And this is where you'd get your wine. So for the purpose of our demonstration, he's just said, look, I've also given the best stuff. You know it's the good stuff when it comes in small bottles in a 4-pack. He said, and if you needed anything else, O Israel, to protect you and keep watch, I also gave you a fire-breathing dragon to look out over. Yeah, that would have been cool, but it was $10. It was good. He's all, Israel, this is what I've given you, O people of God. This is the heart of your Father. The owner gave them everything they needed for success. This is your land flowing with milk and honey. I think sometimes when we talk about faithfulness and surrender to this God, we don't understand the picture He has for us. Oh, this might not be your understanding of financial success. It might not be your understanding of mental or health success. It might not be your definition of workplace success. He goes, but trust me, I knit you together in your mother's womb. You are fearfully, you are wonderfully made. I have a plan for you. I have success in mind for you, that every good and perfect gift comes from God, that the breath you take, that the acumen you have to performing your job and doing your task, he's, oh, that was from me. It has a purpose. Oh, Israel, understand this is what I'm giving you. And yes, therefore, when I showed up, I expected there to be fruit. Not to masquerade around and call yourself a Christian, but to actually have figs. I have blessed you abundantly. It's not just blessing abundantly. The owner has also given an incredible amount of patience and persistence. Patience and persistence. I have sent messenger after messenger after messenger after messenger after messenger. Some you have beaten, some you have killed, some you've just plain knocked over the head. How many messages do you sit in church and go, ooh, babe, I think that one was us? What do you do with that message? That's right, you get rid of it before you get to the car. Otherwise, you'd have to do something with it. And this God is not going to turn over the tables and chairs that I've set up my way. He goes, so I sent my heir, my only son. This is your last hope. And at the end of the story, Jesus goes, and I know you'll reject me too. But guess what? I'm the cornerstone upon which all things are built. Choice is yours. But you ask who I am. I will give you a story. I'm the son of the owner, and I'm the last message of hope you have. And if you choose not to follow my words in red, Israel, you have been sent prophet after prophet after prophet after prophet. And what'd you do with the prophets? Now you got me. And when it comes to surrender, people, I know it's such a dirty word, but we have to understand this model. Working with young adults most of my life, I had so many, Chris, why do you talk about the freedom in Christ when there's more rules and regulations than anything else I could think of? I'm truly going to live my life of freedom. Well, yeah, let me ask you a question. What happens when your life of freedom turns into the greatest prison you've ever encountered? Because believe me, I've done it, and I'm not the first. A buddy of mine that had a tragic near-death experience and came back from it and realized I'm going to live a life of no regrets. And I go, man, that sounds awesome. He goes, no, you're not going to like my definition of that. Whatever desire, I'm going to do. Whatever I feel like doing, I'm going to do. If I'm on the way home to my family and I feel like doing something else or someone else, I will stop and do it. And he did. Within 2 years, the question had to be asked, what happens when your life of no regrets turns into the greatest regret of your life? This is the God that said, I made you, I knit you together, you're fearfully and wonderfully made, you are my workmanship. Trust me, believe me, this is what I want for you. And yet, in this act of surrender, most of us think God is saying this, I've got you a parched, burnout piece of land. And I provided this hardened rock for you in the middle of the Middle Eastern sun. And on this rock, I've given you 3 walls. 3 walls that are firm in its foundation that will never be moved, and a roof that you can't dig through, and iron bars in front of it. This is my plan for you. And you're like, that kind of seems like a prison. He goes, but Israel, you keep trying to get out. You keep trying to get out. And I'm like, yeah, it's a prison. So I posted a fire-breathing dragon. That's where the dragon is. I posted a fire-breathing dragon on top. And if you ever find your way out of my prison, I will scorch you. And somehow in our mentality, we think this is the God we have. This is Christianity. And God said, do you think this is what I want for sons and daughters? Israel, I've not confined you to a prison. I've given you everything you have needed for success. This is my desire for you. This is my desire for you. See, we have an owner in this story that gave them his only son as a final plea. His only son is a final plea, which means, fourthly, an owner gave them no other options. No other options. Over the next couple of weeks, we are going to go through this week that has changed history. Because of the death at the end of this week, and because of that next Sunday morning, him walking out of his own tomb, it shows his persistence and his patience with us. A God that Romans 5 says, while we're still sinners, Christ died for us. You don't deserve him, and you don't deserve his grace and mercy. There has not been a day in my life, not a single day, folks. This is coming from one of your pastors. Fire me. You got the vote. There has not been a day in my life that at the end of the day, I can stand in front of the Almighty God and go, you better give me grace and mercy for what I pulled off on this one, bud. He's going to go, dude, you woke up at 7:30. What about your thought at 7:38? And I'm like, all right, I'll talk to you tomorrow. Blew that day in 8 minutes, didn't I? Not a day in my life that I can stand and say, God, I deserve your grace and mercy. But while we're still sinners, he died for us. It's simply that 2 Peter 3:9, that God is not slow as we understand slowness. God is not willing for any to perish, but for everyone to come and know him. It's a God that says, I move my grace and mercy constantly toward you, but I've given my son. This is your last hope. This is your last option. What do you do with his teachings in this last week? Because yes, with everything I've done and the sacrifice of my son, I do demand obedience. And God thinks he's really earned and deserved it. You're allowed to reject this stone, but it will become the cornerstone. See, that's the question we're left with today. What or who is my cornerstone? What or who is my cornerstone? It shows up in some songs if you're kind of Christian or been growing up in this church stuff. But for most of us, we don't have any experience with a cornerstone. There's some churches around most towns called Cornerstone. That's a cool name. But what in the world is it? See, way before our modern technology and our building and what we can do in construction, in every stone building, one stone was crucial. The cornerstone was that first stone that was laid. And if you mess up with the cornerstone, your entire building or home is going to be messed up. It's just going to be jacked up. This is your plumb line. This is your true point. This by which all other stones are going to rest upon. This is not just the foundation, but it sets the course for every angle of this home. So that cornerstone had to be absolutely perfect. Otherwise, you're making models like I am with foam bricks, and throughout the day, you're cutting and pasting and throwing and glue gunning and just realizing, hobby lobby. He said, this is your choice. Is Jesus Christ the very cornerstone by which everything in your life is built on? My relationships line up plumb on his teaching. He's my cornerstone. My finances rest on him. His cornerstone. His way, what I do with them, how I got. My relationships, my sexuality, my work, my ethics, my morality. Can you look at life and go, he is my cornerstone? 3 weeks ago, no, it's probably about 5 weeks ago now, we talked about what surrender looks like, and I had a big umbrella on stage, and how the things in my life that I love, probably more than I love God. When you look at the time I devote to it and the emotions I have for them, like my wife and my children, my hobbies, my passions. If the umbrella is God's will, how do I make sure every aspect of what I do with them is still under God's will? This is the exact same theory, the exact same theology. Now he just flips it upside down. Am I what everything is built upon in your life? Because if you have some table or chairs set differently, built on something else, someone else, or most likely you, well, this is what I feel at peace with. This is what I feel good about. I think God's happy with me to do this my way, this way. Let me promise you, this is what he's gone after. This is the fight that he picks in Jerusalem. And it shouldn't surprise us, because 3 weeks ago, we had a rich young ruler walk up to him and say, what must I do to be saved? And Jesus says, get rid of your wealth. And the guy walked away sad. Now, he didn't tell everyone. In fact, he didn't tell anyone else to do that, just this guy. Why? Because he took one look at this guy and realized, your wealth is not on me. It's king in your life. Your wealth is the temple in your life. And God forbid I mess up those tables and chairs. Bring it back and build it on me. Or walk away. Who the heck do you think you are? He says, I'm the God that has given you life and set you up for success. Now tell me, who are you? Whew. What a story. Here's how we're going to close today, though. There are 3 things that recently have fell onto North Coast Vineyard that we weren't planning for. There are 3 things that have come up, and we don't know how to do this. We didn't want to send out another little email because no one really gets those and opens them. Well, 18% of you do, thank you. There are 3 things that have landed on North Coast that we feel have our name on it and we want to bring to you. But we didn't plan for them and we didn't budget for them, and we want to bring that to you. So if you're just checking out church, this will give you a good insight into our heart. But this message right now is for those of you that call North Coast home. We started partnering with a group several years ago just to see if they really are who they say they are, called DCPI, Dynamic Church Planning Internationally. They plant churches internationally. And we have fallen in love with how they do church planning. We don't want to send you to Cambodia to plant a church, or you to Laos, or you to Vietnam. Why are Americans going to build an American church? DCPI says we're going to find men and women of God in these countries and raise them and teach them to be church planners. Duh, no brainer. So they've got this pastor's school, if you will, and they translate all their curriculum into whatever country we give them the funds to go into next, with all their teachers and all their trainers. And these pastors come by train and bikes and by foot, some week's journey, to meet for a period of a couple weeks and be trained on how to go back and lead a church, because they've never had any training. We've planted over 130 churches these last 4 years in Japan, in Indonesia, in Vietnam, in Malaysia, and in Cambodia. I just need to stop and thank that group of Vietnam vets who wrestled with this when we first announced it about 4 years ago. Who said they're not going to give a dime of their money, and they hate going to a church that gives money to that hellhole that still carries such woundedness in their life. Not just what they experienced there, but what they had to come home to because of America's feeling about the Vietnam War. And we sat, and we listened, and we talked, and we cried. And we saw that group of men, a heart change going, maybe this is the one place that my dime should be going to build a church. Maybe with all the hatred I've taken from that place, we should have an act of love. Just this last year, on top of what we've already done. We planted 35 new churches in Vietnam alone. For about $30,000, $40,000, we can finish off all the curriculum and all the training that is needed for Cambodia and Indonesia, which means Vietnam, Malaysia, Japan, Cambodia, and Indonesia are all done with our church planting movement that goes on and on and on and on. We didn't ask for your permission. We just said, yes, that's got our name on it. Number two, we weren't looking for this, didn't know it would come on our calendar, but in the last 3 months, the reality of Palma Valley Community Church came. It looks like this. It's got a steeple, it's got a bell tower. For the first time ever, North Coast will have a church. How about that? And I have spent my open weekends in the last 3 months out at Palma Valley Community, and I have fallen in love with the 22 people that are left in that church. And they have faithfully, for a couple years, kept the doors open, but that's all they've been able to do is just keep doors open with no leadership. I'm sorry, guys. You have great leadership, no lead pastor. And they have a vote coming up next week, what they've already assured, and they're just giddy about. They want to become our 7th campus of North Coast Church. We've been using our videos and our stuff out there for the last 2 months, and they love it. Here's the thing. The church was built in 1961. The bathrooms inside are 1961 bathrooms, and they are not friendly. And I would not invite a female guest to use those bathrooms. The entire bathrooms and corner infrastructure need to be torn out and redone. It's got 1961 electronics for audio and video. We need to go in and put in audio and video. Total there about $80,000. You know us if you've been coming for years. We have never sent you a letter at the end of the year saying we need help. We're in dire straits. Unapologetically, we send you a letter saying you want to keep supporting and do what you do. But we've been incredibly faithful stewards of your funds. We have ended the year in the black every year. We don't live, presumably, on next year's income. We take last year's offering, and we set next year's budget on 90% of last year's offering. We don't even assume we're going to grow. We just want to be faithful. These two things have fallen in our lap that we didn't budget for. And lastly, this is Jeff Moore's. This is his wife, Erin, his daughters, India and Isla, and this is their son, Israel. He has become one of my dearest friends over the last 8 years. Dang it, I've done this 3 times. Good. He has led our Jordan ministry, 18 to 25-year-old singles. This is what the Jordan looks like on Thursday nights. They take over our campus. There's 500, 618 to 25-year-old singles that take over this campus on a Thursday night and stay till midnight. This place is a riot on Thursdays. And over the last 3 years, Jeff has had this growing burden more and more and more. Chris, I want to lead my own church. I want to be a church planner. Okay, I want to do this. I want to reach a group of people that North Coast isn't reaching. It's not going to be a North Coast church. It's not going to have our name on it. It's going to be his teaching, their worship, their ministry. Jeff, go. We'll send you to Cambodia, Indonesia. We want to get behind you. And he goes, no, I want to go to South Oceanside. And we said, well, those are our people. That's our offering. Jeff, we want you to plant the most amazing church in our own backyard. And we want to help launch it. We want you to talk to every staff person we have and convince them to go with you. We want you to openly, publicly use your last 3 months at the Jordan to convince any young adult, if they have a fire in their belly, to do something like this, to go with you. Jeff has taken 3 of our staff. We've given the last 3 months of the year to pay their salary, but to work full-time for him. But we also want to do something special for Jeff and his family. Like, I don't know, a mug or a little Jesus trinket. And as we're trying to figure out how to help Jeff, the idea came out. Jeff, if we continued to pay your salary and all of your family medical benefits for all of next year, would that help? And tears just came down his face. That's our biggest fear. So without asking you permission, we said, we're going to do that. We're going to pay his salary. We're going to pay 3 of our staff to go with him for 3 months, his for a year, and his family benefits. It's going to be a little different church. It's going to be more charismatic. They're going to do things a little differently. Some of you are like, more charismatic? Go. It starts in January. It's called Rhythm Church. If you're interested in it, it's in South Oceanside. And we want to give them a send-off like no other. There's no competition. We're the church. We want to continue to change Cambodia and Indonesia. We want to do something out in Palma Valley, and we want to do something with Rhythm Church. In total, about $230,000 we didn't budget for. I don't know how your family budget works, but we don't plan for that. So here's what I'm going to ask. For those of you that call North Coast your church, some of you are in a place right now where your heart is stirring, but you're broken because you just can't do anything financially right now. Don't. This isn't your time. This isn't for you. No guilt on that at all. Others of you, there's an envelope in your bulletin I want you to take. Anything that comes in on that in the next 2 weeks is going to these projects. You can give online if you want. There's a place to click on online giving. We're just going to take one offering, no second buckets, because we know that our offering should be the next 2 months. We just ask some of you, can you above and beyond say, here's what my family can do. Chris, it ain't much. When your ain't much totals all of North Coast, it ain't something to sneeze at. We can do something amazing. It's all one unified budget. I'm just asking you for 2 weeks. We want to go to DCPI and say, let's take care of these countries, keep planting churches. We want to put our arms around Palma Valley and say, welcome to the family. Let's reach this valley. And we want to look at South Oceanside and a group of people that probably wouldn't come here and go, Jeff, go get them. And take anybody and everybody we have to help for that kingdom. For his kingdom, not ours. That we feel has landed on our vineyard at this time. Here's the thing. We already voted yes on all those. Because we don't vote no on God things. We just want to ask some of you, can you get behind it? What's going to happen with the Jordan on Thursday nights? I'm glad you asked. We got a 14-year-old kid around here masquerading as a pastor called Chris Hilkin, who we think has an extraordinary gift. And Chris said, hey guys, listen, we've got an incredible team leading our juniors and seniors, 11th to 12th grade. I can still give them some leadership and still teach in there, but we have a teaching team anyway. It's just Thursday nights. I can teach there. They already have a great team. He goes, we can do both for a season. I really want to do both. And we tried to talk him out of it. And he and his wife and family goes, no, this has got the Hilkins name on it right now. So as of 2 weeks ago, Chris Hilkins started teaching the Jordan so Jeff can get on his church planning. And he's teaching on Thursday nights. Now, let me make this clear. It's for 18 to 25-year-old singles. Because some of you right now, Chris Hilkin, Thursday night, shut up. Let them have their space. And in a nutshell, that's North Coast and what's happening. I don't want to guilt anybody. What do you normally give the next 2 weeks? Are there a couple hundred of us that can go, this one I want to be in on. I want to plant churches and keep doing what we're doing here. God, thanks for incredible stories that involve people like us. Thanks for your faithfulness, for pursuing us over and over and over with grace and mercy, and in return, simply asking for faithfulness. God, may you find the tables and chairs in our lives today that are not built on you as a cornerstone. May we once and for all stop killing the message, but take it and apply it to our life. May you continue to provide healthy churches in areas where they need them desperately. May continue to use us and find us faithful to do so. In Jesus' name, amen.
Well, as always, we'd love to connect with you. Whether you have a comment, question, or even a prayer request, we'd love to hear from you. You can send that to info@northcoastchurch.com. We also want to thank you for your continued support. If you'd like to give, you can go to our website or you can give on our North Coast Church app. We hope that today's message was challenging and encouraging for you. We hope to see you next week.